Hey, what's going on YouTube? So today I wanted to do my next installment of my top 25 rankings for week 6. So weird to think we're already heading into week 6 of the 2015-16 college football season. Was a pretty vastly entertaining, excuse me, my voice is gone. It was a pretty vastly entertaining weekend this past weekend. The Notre Dame-Clemson game was awesome to watch. The Alabama-Georgia game was, that was a blowout, but, there were a ton of entertaining games. I think my favorite was, the Arizona State-UCLA game's probably up there, too. Anyway, Texas A&M game was pretty good as well. So, move on to my top 25 rankings for this coming week. So, my 5 outside. So I have Toledo, West Virginia, Boise State, Duke, and Oregon. So nice little mashup of teams here, a bunch of them in different situations. Now, West Virginia lost 44-24 this past week to OU. Expected to be a pretty tight game. Now, I just think that West Virginia just got completely outmatched by OU. They had their chances to get back in the game, and then OU's defense took over in the end. It was a pretty competitive game up until the start of the fourth quarter. Whenever OU looked like they were starting to pull away, West Virginia would pull back within 7 or 10 points. But like I said, kind of pulled away in the end with a fumble recovered for a touchdown, I believe, by Eric Stryker. So, yeah, I do think that West Virginia has a good chance of getting back inside the top 25 this week. They do have a winnable game against Oklahoma State at home. Toledo's a weird situation. They are one of the very, very few non-Power 5 teams that are undefeated against Power 5 teams this year. They do have an overtime win against Iowa State and then a victory against Arkansas, which is starting to look a little bit better now. Arkansas this past weekend beat Tennessee, and then week before competed with Texas A&M. So I think Arkansas is starting to get it together a little bit, and so that win's looking better for Toledo. And they are undefeated right now. So Boise State, ever since the Hail Mary loss to BYU, they've looked pretty good, including just an absolute dismantling of Virginia, not this past week, but the week before, and then another win against Hawaii this past weekend. So move on to Duke. So the Georgia Tech win's not looking fantastic right now, just because of how North Carolina was able to beat them. Georgia Tech, I really thought would be one of the contenders inside the ACC this year, but I still do firmly believe that the Coastal Division is Duke's to lose right now. They didn't look great in a 9-7 win over Boston College, but Boston College is a solid team, definitely going to be a bowl team. So good to see the Duke scrapping for those wins. For Duke, I don't think it's ever going to be pretty, but they do have a very real chance of going undefeated for the rest of the regular season if they can hold it together against teams like Miami, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, teams like that. So move on to Oregon. So I believe it was a 38-24 win over Colorado. It just feels kind of weird watching the Oregon. It actually might have been 41-24. Anyway, it feels weird watching the Oregon team this year. It seemed like even though they did pull away in the end, it just seemed like the Colorado game was a little bit of a struggle for them. Missing throws shouldn't have been missed. I think that's just partly just the inexperience in quarterback and just the lack of, I won't say lack of talent at quarterbacks, you can't really say that, but just the lack of rhythm in that offense right now. Obviously the talent's there outside of the quarterback position on offense. I think they're as good as ever at their skill positions. Now, defense leaves a little bit to be desired. Better performance last night, but again, it is just a Colorado offense. So Oregon does go on to play Washington State this week, which I think they will. I think they will probably dominate that game. Washington State proved tough for Cal last week, but it is still Washington State. I think they are one of the worst teams in the Pac-12. So move on to my top 25. So at number 25, I have Memphis. Memphis does have a game that the importance of it is downscaled a little bit just because Ole Miss lost, but a game in, I believe it's a week from Saturday, against Ole Miss. So if they can win that game, that'll vault them up into being a I don't know, I wouldn't say a non-Power 5 playoff contender yet, but I do think that would vault them up into the New Year's, one of the New Year's Six bowls. Definitely into talk for that. I do think the AAC has has quite a few underrated contenders this year. The AAC is pretty strong this year. Wasn't a lot of it wasn't the teams that a lot of people expected to come out of the AAC. Teams like UCF, Cincinnati, Houston. I mean, Cincinnati did look good in a win over Miami, but I think I do think the two best teams right now are Memphis and Navy. So move on to my next team, which is actually Navy. So Navy heads into a game, I believe, this weekend against Notre Dame. So this is the game that I've kind of been talking about for a while now that is very important for Navy. I mean, if they're able to win this game, especially against the Notre Dame team that's looked very, I'd say, really impressive this year. Tough loss to Clemson last weekend. They got a 2-point conversion, maybe would have been able to pull one off in overtime, but they got stuffed at the 1-yard line. Did not look very good up until the fourth quarter, though. That's kind of been Notre Dame's thing this year, at least the last couple of weeks, has been pull away in the second half. Definitely saw that against UMass. But I do think this is a big game for both teams. This would be an impressive win for Notre Dame if they can win to get back on track. But I do think that a win this weekend for Navy would kind of shoot them into the national spotlight, definitely a lot more. So move on to number 23, Iowa. Just an ugly game against Wisconsin. If you watched it, defensive struggle. Wisconsin just couldn't get anything going. For Iowa, though, good. Another scrappy win after I believe it was like 57-yard field goal they kicked 2 weeks ago to beat Pitt. Impressive win for them. It kind of vaults them up into the upper echelon of the Big Ten. I'm not quite ready to say they're a Big Ten contender yet, but that is a big win for them, I believe, to start off Big Ten play for the year. So move on to number 22, UCLA. So big drop after losing to Arizona State. Didn't look that good. I think that this is definitely highlighting Josh Rosen's inconsistencies at this point. He'll play fantastic 1 week, and then you'll have weeks like this past weekend and the BYU game where it just doesn't look that good. It wasn't just him, though. It was the entire UCLA team. Running backs didn't look great. Receivers were dropping passes. The running backs were dropping passes. But, yeah. Sorry, like I said, my voice is gone. So, yeah, I do think that UCLA can get back on track. I think they can still contend in the Pac-12, but for the time being, they're not looking too impressive. So move on to number 21, Georgia. So again, team that I had in the college football playoff last week. I really thought they were going to come out with a better performance against Alabama, but that kind of is vintage Georgia for you. Grayson Lambert did not look good. They pulled him in the second quarter, but then put him back in the third. I don't think that that's entire. I mean, obviously, compared to the way he was playing in previous games, not impressive at all on his part, but I think that's partially due to Mark Richt. I think his quarterback management that game was not very good. Probably should have run the ball more, which is hard to say because they did give Chubb over 20 carries. But I do think that Georgia can get back on track. They are still the SEC. I don't know if they're the SEC's favorites at this point with how good Florida's looking, but it looks like a two-team battle right now. So move on to number 20, Michigan. So Michigan's been looking unbelievably good since that opening week loss to Utah. And that opening week loss to Utah is looking pretty good now as well. So this past weekend they were able to get by a decent Maryland team, but the defense has just been looking unbelievably good for Michigan. This is the second I believe in the last something like 15 quarters they've given up 7 points. Just absolutely shut down BYU last week. 2 weeks ago, shut down, like I said, Maryland this past week. Just had that offense in total disarray. Michigan is definitely looking like I'd say the third, fourth best team in the Big Ten right now. If not, they can definitely play a role of spoiler for teams like Ohio State and Michigan State. Not only spoiler, but a team that I think if they can get a few big top 25 wins, that leaps them up into college football playoff contention. I think a lot of people are talking about them as a real possibility in the college football playoff as well. So move on to number 19, California. So Cal had a close win against Wazoo this past week. That's kind of been the mantra for Cal this year is close wins. That Texas win and this past weekend. So if they can keep winning, if Jared Goff can keep playing this way, then I don't see why they can't contend in the Pac-12 North. Excuse me. I mean, especially with how weak it's looking right now. Stanford, I think Stanford qualifies as the favorite right now, but Oregon definitely, or obviously Oregon not looking the part. I don't think it's late enough to count Oregon out yet. But for the time being, I think it is Stanford and Cal's division to lose. So California has a huge game this weekend at Utah. This is where game day is going to be, which is kind of weird to think that a couple weeks ago you were saying the game day in Week 6 would be in I don't know if it's in Utah or Cal. Either way, that would be the game day game of the week. So move on to number 18. I've got Oklahoma State. So scrappy win against Kansas State. Not pretty in the Big 12, or not pretty in Big 12 play so far, but they are 5-0. They have beaten some decent teams now, and they move into a big game this week with West Virginia. Kind of see if they can prove they're for real. If they can get to 6-0 and then 3-0 in the Big 12, I think that's big for them. Kind of prove that they can hang with the top 3 teams in the Big 12, the Baylor's, TCU's, and OU's of the world. So move on to number 17, Ole Miss. So tough weekend for Ole Miss. I don't think anyone saw that Florida game coming. Florida kind of a mystery, but I do think that Ole Miss can still get it together. I think they're still a very talented team. Rough game for Chad Kelly. I don't think he hadn't seen corners near that good up to that point. Even Alabama. Vernon Hargraves had a great game, and I do think that Ole Miss is still a contender in the SEC West, but for the time being, they've got an uphill battle if they do want to still contend for that division title. Alabama's, of course, looking strong again. A&M, LSU, even Mississippi State might be a tough out for them. So move on to number 16, USC. So USC heads into Week 6. I believe it's 3-1. So ever since that, I think people are starting to forget the Stanford lost a little bit more. Stanford looks better and better, and Cody Kessler is still kind of proving that he can lead that offense. Then that USC still kind of has a chance in the college football playoff. They do head into, I wouldn't say a huge game, but a pretty big game this Thursday against Washington. If they can get a big win here, then I think that will kind of put them back up into contender status in the Pac-12 South, especially with UCLA falling off this past week. So really, I think the only undefeated team left in the Pac-12 South is Utah. Obviously, they are the favorites right now, but with teams like Arizona just falling off completely, Arizona State not looking great. Even after, they did beat UCLA this past weekend, which was good for them. But I do think that USC probably is the second biggest favorite to walk away with the Pac-12 South right now. So move on to number 15, Stanford. So that Northwestern loss, again, looking better and better by the weeks as Northwestern keeps getting better. Stanford, of course, looking pretty strong ever since that Northwestern loss. Huge win against Arizona this past weekend. I believe it was 55-17. Of course, a couple of weeks before that, being able to beat USC, and moving into a big game this weekend against UCLA. I think people are starting to realize that UCLA is prone to inconsistencies, but they still are a very talented team. If Stanford can walk away with a win this Thursday, or not this Thursday, sorry, that's next week, next Thursday, then I do think that kind of puts them as the lone favorite in the Pac-12 North. So move on to number 14, Notre Dame. So close game for them against Clemson, a little bit of a heartbreaker at the end, missing the 2-point conversion to tie the game. They were coming back pretty strong in the fourth quarter. Did not look very good before the fourth quarter, but it is good to see that Notre Dame can, pull out these scrappy wins that they absolutely have to. Like I said, obviously lost this past week, but they do head into a big game this weekend against Navy, like I was talking about earlier. So move on to number 13, Florida State. I think this Florida State-Miami game coming up this weekend could be like the one of the low-key best games of the week. Florida State has struggled to really put anyone away this week. They had a way too close of a win against Wake Forest this past weekend. A Wake Forest team that might be the worst team in the ACC this year. So I do think that Florida State is still, I would say, second favorite at this point to walk away with the ACC title. Obviously Clemson right now is the favorite, but as long as Florida State stays undefeated, doesn't let a team like Wake Forest or Boston College before that upset them, then I think they'll be fine. But like I said, this is a big game against Miami this weekend. I think since Al Golden is on such a hot seat, Miami will play pretty good. Obviously, Florida State should walk away with the win, but I think you could definitely put them on upset alert this weekend. So move on to number 12, Northwestern. So Northwestern is definitely, at this point to me, the third best team in the Big Ten, if not the second. I mean, you can't really say anything until they do play Michigan State or Ohio State. I mean, they came away with a huge win against Minnesota, 27-0. I did not see that coming at all. I definitely thought the Northwestern was a team on upset alert this past weekend. They keep on proving over and over and over again that they, are a contender, that they do have a legitimate shot to finish the year inside the top 15, maybe inside the top 10, and they should be taken pretty seriously in the Big Ten. So move on to number 11, Florida. So Florida kind of came out of nowhere with this win against Ole Miss. I think you could pretty easily put Florida inside the top 10 too at this point. For them, I think it's about finding a little bit more consistency. At this point, I do think they're the SEC East title favorites. I think they're the only undefeated team left in the SEC East. But they do head into this weekend, like I said, undefeated. Will Greer looked great, and the defense just went into complete shutdown mode. It is weird to me how Florida's gone through the season, close win to Tennessee, barely beating East Carolina, and then just absolutely derailing the number 3 team in the country. I do think that the team's starting to come together a lot better, though. Jim McElwain's definitely got him headed in the right direction. I think he's done obviously he's done a phenomenal job so far in resurrecting that program. But this is a big game this weekend for Florida. Going into Columbia, Mizzou had a big win against South Carolina this past weekend. I think this Drew Lock kid is a lot better for Mizzou than Matty Mock. Kind of proving for Mizzou that there's a lot of talent left on that defense. I think it's going to be a very tough game for Will Greer. I think that even though Ole Miss's defense was pretty solid, at least I thought they were supposed to be, they're a pretty talented defense. I do think that Mizzou is a better defense that Florida's going to have to handle. So move on to number 10, Oklahoma. So Oklahoma looks like they're for real so far this year. Big opening win for the Big 12 or for Big 12 play for them this year. Winning 44-24 against West Virginia. They just looked like they controlled the entire game. Pretty much the entire game. You got you get the apparent vision that they were going to win. So they do head into this weekend the Red River rivalry against Texas. Obviously, both programs head in opposite directions. I do think that OU needs to make sure they don't overlook this game. Texas has proven this year that I do think that they can come close to winning against good teams. That especially in a rivalry like this, where a lot of times you can just throw previous stats out the window, rankings, anything, record, and I do think if OU doesn't take this game seriously, then it could end up being a pretty close game. They do head into week 7 with a big game against Kansas State. So I do think that for the time being, OU is one of the 3 Big 12 favorites. I don't know if I'm ready to put them up directly with TCU and Baylor yet, considering how good both teams have been looked this past weekend. But for the time being, they are definitely in that upper echelon of 3 in the Big 12. So move on to number 9, Alabama. Alabama, obviously, a huge win against Georgia. I personally didn't see that coming, but I can understand, and Nick Saban had them ready. Just looked dominant on both sides of the ball, every facet of the game. Coker looked pretty good. Derrick Henry was looking really good on the ground. The defense was just on point. So I think right now it's hard to say that Alabama is not one of the SEC title favorites again, and I think that win definitely leapfrogged them back into college football playoff contention. So move on to number 8, Texas A&M. So Texas A&M had a 30-17 win against a tough Mississippi State team. So I do think that A&M right now, the offense has been looking pretty good, not great. Would be good if they can put up some more points with how much talent they do have on that offense. Christian Kirk obviously has been looking fantastic, like one of the best freshmen in the country. Kyle Allen's been looking good. Trey Carson, just an absolute animal. And obviously the defense has vastly improved. So I do think that A&M is one of the title favorites for the SEC this year, and obviously you got to put them into college football playoff contention now. Now they do have maybe their biggest game of the year, at least to that point, in 2 weeks against Alabama. So obviously they need to make sure that they get ready for that, use the bye week to their advantage, and see if they can actually. I don't know if I call it an upset, but beat a good Alabama team and maybe get themselves into the top 5. So move on to number 7, LSU. So another 200-yard, 3-touchdown week for Leonard Fournette. Just unbelievable to watch. Obviously still the Heisman favorite. It's hard to see anyone beating LSU anytime soon. Like I said, maybe Alabama. I mean, LSU they do have a few difficult games coming up. South Carolina could prove to be a tough out. South Carolina's been up and down this year, so it's hard to tell what you're going to get from them. But then they got Florida in 2 weeks, so start really seeing if LSU can pull off some of these big wins and see if they are for real, if they are a top 10 team this year. So move on to number 6, Utah. So Utah did get some first place votes for the first time. Actually, I don't know if it was the first time this year, but they did get 10 first place votes, which obviously is their highest amount of the year. People are obviously taking Utah very seriously at this point after that just dismantling of Oregon. With the loss of UCLA, kind of puts them firmly as the Pac-12 title favorites right now. Definitely can count them into the college football playoff this year, and I think if they do win this weekend against Cal, then they will be firmly inside the Pac-12 or firmly inside college football playoff contention. So move on to number 5, Clemson. Clemson kind of proving they can they can win these scrappy wins if they have to, which is big because I don't think that they're going to face too many teams in the ACC. They're going to be able to just outmatch them talent-wise. Obviously, the Louisville game was way too close. This Notre Dame game could have gone to overtime very easily, but the fact of the matter is they didn't. Clemson won, still undefeated, with a pretty impressive resume so far, and I do think right now that they are firmly inside the college football playoff picture, and also right now are firmly favorites for the ACC title. So move on to number 4, Michigan State. Did not look very good in the win against Purdue, only winning by 3. So I do think Michigan State is still in the college football playoff picture for the time being. If the season ended today, I do think they'd be in, but they have to get better. Obviously, these 3, 7, 14-point wins against just not very good non-Power 5 teams are going to have to those performances are going to have to improve by the time that they get into the meat of their Big Ten schedule. Games like Ohio State, especially the Michigan game's looking a lot tougher for Michigan State now. The way that the offense is playing right now, just not going to be able to get it done against a team like Michigan. So move on to number 3, TCU. So TCU had just a dismantling of Texas this past weekend. Defense shut down Gerard Hurd. Offense looked very good. Boykin looked good. Aaron Green, Josh Doxson looking like he's one of the best receivers in the country this year. So yeah, move on to number 2, Baylor. So Baylor, some people had them on upset alert against Texas Tech. I don't know why. Baylor just kind of ran away with that game. Yeah, the defense did hold pretty strong for giving up 35 points. It's you can actually say they did pretty good. I mean, that Texas Tech offense is very good. I wouldn't say for the most part they shut down Mahomes, but I think that Baylor is proving they are one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in the country this year. So move on to number 1, obviously Ohio State again. Played close with Indiana. I mean, that's kind of been a trend for them this year, playing it close. Now, for the time being, that's fine. I do think that if Baylor keeps winning or TCU keeps winning the way that they're winning right now, then yes, maybe that number 1 spot is overtaken. But again, for the time being, I think Ohio State still is the number 1 team in the country. Until someone does prove they're all around better than Ohio State, then I think the AP poll, the voters, coaches poll, all of them, still going to keep Ohio State number 1. So, yep, that's my rankings for the week. I'll come back later today or tomorrow with my Week 6 predictions. Should be I don't know if it'll be as entertaining a week as last week. A few low-key good games this weekend. But, yeah, hoping for another entertaining weekend in college football. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.